Young man, I wish to speak to you today about pornography.
Every day I see men who wish they hadn't slipped off the edge and made their wives cry.
This was not a good thing to be doing, but like addiction happens, it just little by little, and I couldn't stop.
I was attacked by Satan from the cradle, and I never got a chance to experience mortality without this cloud over me.
I was so far gone that I had no idea whether it was the spirit or the adversary.
It's just a preconception that Satan has placed in us since coming into this world kind of as teenagers, that like there's no way we could ever amount to anything.
Will you ever be rescued? Will you make it through your own survival story? The answer is yes.
This is a new weapon that Satan has been using.
Deception,
we're not talking
distraction,
about it.
discouragement.
I fight to watch men re-access the power of God.
I am looking tonight.
It's not out there.
It's become far too normalized.
It's
for men, young and old.
I realize now that I am a warrior
who care enough about this battle between good and evil
against the adversary
to sign on and speak
if
up.
I turn my life around and be the person that they need.
We are at war, and for these next few minutes, I want to be a one-man recruiting station.
All right, Garrett. The time has come for you.
You want to hear about little old
share
me?
Your story. I do. How did it all start?
Well, I think to understand my backstory, you first have to understand that as a youth, I was fascinated with romance. It just seemed like the coolest thing to me. Where many teenage guys might shy away from the rom-coms and romance movies, that was not me. I thought they were fantastic.
That is me.
Good, yeah. We're on the same boat then.
Subtle jab.
But because of that, I always had this longing for relationship, especially with the opposite sex. Now, that has very little to do with how I got into pornography and masturbation, but it does have everything to do with why I stayed and why it got worse. I kind of stumbled across the problem accidentally, just as you mentioned in your backstory. I stumbled across masturbation and had no idea what I was doing. My parents are old. I'm the 8th of 9 kids. So my parents were a good, 39 years older than I am, 39, 40 years older than I am. So,
that's a good Utah family.
Absolutely.
Right
there. And it made for a unique dynamic in that my parents could never imagine what dangers were out there when it came to the internet, right? Because they didn't deal with it when they were kids. It wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even an inkling of a thing. No one had even imagined it yet.
Oh boy. That just hits you like a storm.
Yeah, so I stumbled across masturbation accidentally. Just in playing around as a kid, I caused it to happen. And I didn't really think anything of it. It wasn't really burned into my memory or anything like that. But it was there. And it wasn't until I stumbled across pornography through video games that my mind connected the two. And because of my older parents, I had essentially no information about any of it. Like I didn't know what I was doing or that it was wrong, or, well, that's not a true statement. Deep down, I knew it was wrong. Something told me it was wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't have tried to hide it. But I didn't know how wrong it was.
You think that was... Yeah. Do you think it was like just kind of like the Holy Ghost or
Yeah, I would.
light of Christ?
Yeah, I would call it the light of Christ. That yeah
Yeah.
led me to know that.
How old were
I
you
was
around this
10.
time?
I was 10 years old. So that's when, yeah.
Dang.
So that was tough for me. In that I kind of got exposed to it. Something somewhere deep inside, I knew what I was doing was wrong, but like I said, I didn't know how wrong. And because I didn't know how wrong, I didn't feel too bad about continuing to explore. And I did continue to
Yeah.
explore
Oh.
a decent amount, but it wasn't until I turned 12 and wait, before I turned 12, let's clarify here. When I was 11, my father became the bishop. Um,
Oh,
and then
that
it
changes
does.
things.
Then I turned 12 and went to have my interview for becoming a deacon.
Oh boy.
Upon which I learned
Oh no.
just how bad the stuff I was doing was, and then it did have an effect on my
Oh dude.
uh, worthiness.
Oh
Yeah,
bro.
so
That's
that was a tough one.
man.
That was
And that was the first time your dad heard
yeah,
about it?
yeah, yep.
Oh.
So
Oh, that's a bomb right
yeah,
there.
yeah. So I mean, so it was a bit of a, I don't want to say traumatic because it wasn't traumatic. It didn't destroy me or anything, but it was certainly a impactful experience, and
I bet. Oh
it
my
did
gosh.
lead to temporary recovery, but it was recovery out of fear, right?
Yeah.
I just had this terrifying experience with my own father,
Right.
uh, and I I had a
Right.
reprieve. I didn't go into that area because I was
Yeah.
scared of it. Um,
Fear is fear is still owned by the
exactly,
adversary. And so even though it can do good things sometimes, it's ultimately not a long-term solution.
exactly, and that's what happened to me. That fear probably lasted about 8 to 10 months before the fear started to fade, and um, started to slip back into it. By the time by the time I turned 14, I was back into it, and once again I got uh, interviewed by my own father,
Dang.
uh, and had to admit that I had fallen back into bad habits, which obviously not easy.
Oh, when your dad's the bishop, that's just
It's tough.
yeah.
Wasn't easy, and my dad did
Wow.
his best to be, you know, to act the role of bishop and not his father, which is it's a difficult balance to uh, maintain.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah,
imagine.
so but once again, that kind of scared me a little bit, but this time not nearly as much. Uh, and
Hmm.
part of the reason I wasn't so scared is because I'd been living a lie. You see, in my priesthood quorums, I was an
Hmm.
extremely active member of church, which meant in my deacon's quorum, I served in the presidency, and my teacher's quorum, I served in the presidency. Like, I wasn't, to the outside world, I was a spiritual juggernaut, right? I was the kid that everybody went to
Hmm.
for church things. That's who I was. But in
Wow.
secret, I was constantly struggling. So there wasn't all that at the time
Hmm.
when I was interviewed to become a teacher. There wasn't all that much fear because I was like, well, I'm still doing these spiritual things. I'm still uh, living this spiritual life, and So, it's okay if I'm struggling, which, in hindsight is a clear manipulation of Satan, but it was
Yeah.
it was what it was.
Yeah. I totally connect with the exploration and Satan always has these justifications, like, well, it's not that bad. You gotta know.
Right.
You gotta you don't know. How do you
Right.
know if it's
Yeah.
bad?
Yep. So, from that point forward, I ran myself into the ground is what I did. Because I had justified to myself that living this two-faced life was okay. I continued to live it, and things got worse. By the time I was 16, I was so far into it, I didn't even, in the interview I had with my father as the bishop, I didn't even bring it up because I had justified so heavily my two-faced life, and that was a scary prospect for me. I was off, at that point I'd basically gone off the deep end with everything. I was way further into the addiction than any teenager should be. And
Dang.
Luckily, by that point, my father did get released from the bishopric.
That's a good thing in this
instance, it is because with a new bishop coming in and everything, I took it as a sign that I should try to clean up my act because I knew my mission was coming around the bend, and I
that's a big
yeah, I
motivation.
knew I was going to go on a mission. I was like, I'm not, like, I have to go on a mission. I've got to turn my life around. So I went and talked to my bishop, the new one at this point, and he made it very clear what was required of me, and so I put my mind to it. That was what I had to do, which is a lot harder than saying it. saying that I put my mind to it is easy.
Definitely.
Actually doing that was hard, and so I ended up in a very difficult place because I think it's the book of Joshua that says no man can serve two masters. Well, I am living evidence that is not a possibility. I was tearing myself apart because I was trying to serve two masters and I didn't know how to stop serving one of them. Well, to be clear, I didn't know how to stop serving Satan. To stop serving Christ was easy.
Yeah.
All I had to do was stop doing all the spiritual stuff that I was doing, but I wasn't willing to do that. And so I was in this pickle.
I don't, there's all this, and there's talk in the scriptures and in like Christian media today about people who serve Satan, and everyone tends to phrase it like people know what they're doing when they're serving the adversary. That's 100% not true. Like service to these two beings, one being good, the other being evil, look very different from each other. I went into a probably not the best Wikipedia, but I looked up the Church of Satan.
Oh, wow.
Just because I wanted to know what they believed. I wanted to understand, like, how can they worship Satan? And nobody in that church actually believes in Satan. Nobody.
Jeez.
And that's why they're some of his strongest followers. Because one of the things that gives Satan's power is our unbelief in him, and our unawareness of our actions and having our agency taken away from us.
Yep. So, yeah, no, it as a 17-year-old boy, dealing with this was not the easiest thing, but I was a fairly gifted, academically speaking, gifted student, and they gave me some unique abilities. Throughout high school, I had nearly perfect recall. I don't want to claim that I had like perfect memory or anything like that. I'm specifically referring to recall. So I could go into a test, like an anatomy test, and having just looked at the diagrams in the book before class, I could go into the test and just pull back up the diagrams in my memory, in my short-term memory, and then just write down the answers, right? Like that was the level at which I could do that,
Sheesh.
which also made it pornography a very difficult thing for me to deal
That's
with, because I
crazy.
could do the same thing with pornography.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. That's a two-edged sword.
It is a two-edged sword. And I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know how to get out of it. I was trying to get worthy for my mission. I didn't know how to get out of this, and so I tried everything, and eventually I just kind of got frustrated with myself, and I had participated in a memory. It's I guess it's a memory exercise. It's called creating a mind palace, and you use it for memory to increase your
Oh
memory.
wow.
You create a place in your brain that you're very familiar with, right? And if you have to remember something, you put it in a specific location in your mind palace, and that helps you remember it.
The mind palace. We got Sherlock
That's
Holmes
right.
up in here. This is crazy.
In fact, that's where I got the idea from originally, was from Sherlock Holmes, and
yeah.
so, and
That's
it is
insane.
it's a real thing. It's not, it's a real exercise, and so I used it with frequency,
Man.
and so part of me, I was curious. I was trying to beat this, and I said, you know what, I can do this. What if, instead of using it for memory, what if I created a place in my mind palace that I intentionally destroyed? And so I had this house in my head, and I would travel into the house, and anytime I had pornographic thoughts, I would go to a specific room in the center of the house. The room was almost like a vault, except it had a little postman slit, and I would, imagine these images as these pictures, right? Printed pictures that I would just slide into the postman slit into this room, right? And every time I had a thought, I'd go back in there and I would slide them into this room. And then after sliding them into the room, right next to the door was a big old red button, which blew up the room.
Wow.
So
I love that visual.
Yeah, I basically just slid them into this room over and over again, and then I press the button and blow them up. Was that 100% effective, and that like I would do it one time and they'd never come back? No. But if I did it over and over and over again, which is what I did, 6 months or so, I just over and over and over again, I would slide those pictures into this place and blow them up. And basically, I trained my brain not to give me visual images. I stopped having thoughts, like visual thoughts. I stopped having them. And the voice inside my head stopped talking to me. You know how
Wow.
some people have a voice in their head that they could, if they would like to, they could hold a conversation with it. I didn't.
Yeah.
I basically
Yeah.
shut mine off by
That's
sheer
crazy.
force. And because of that, I was able to actually make it to my mission. Right, I was able to just squeak by, and uh, mission.
Crazy.
My mission was a fantastic experience for me because, like any missionary who had dealt with an addiction to the level that I had a lot of guilt about it. And so in the MTC, I committed to to committing everything to Christ. Everything I had, I would give everything. I
Right.
became that missionary that was like annoyingly perfect. Like I obeyed all the rules. I
Yeah.
like I obeyed all the rules. I would get like 15 to 20 lessons a week. Like I'd get tons with like I was that guy, the guy that everyone's like, who are you? Like um
Yeah. I definitely had one of those guys on my mission. That was fun.
nobody wanted to be my companion because I was you know pretty anal about it. Like I you know I wasn't g- I wasn't gonna let you sleep in. Like you're my companion. No, it's time for you to get up. Let's do our studies. Let's get to work. And
What, you don't have this verse memorized? You got to get
yeah,
on
get
that,
on
bro.
it. You know. And so my mission was fantastic. It was going fantastically well. I was more spiritual on my mission than I'd ever been in my entire life because for the first time ever, I wasn't living a two-faced life. I was 100% committed to Christ. Um, so that was it was a fantastic thing for me. And then something bad happened. It wasn't actually a bad thing. It was a totally fine thing,
Oh.
but it ended poorly for me. Because of my hard work ethic
Oh.
and my spirituality, I was called to the office, not as an assistant to the president. That's the position that gets the recognition, shall we say. I was called as the secretary of um, travel and documentation, and so for 6 months, my job
Ooh.
was to arrange all travel in the mission and also ensure that all missionaries coming in the mission and missionaries within the mission and then missionaries leaving the mission all had the proper documentation. Uh,
Mm,
it's a very unique position to have. Uh,
crazy. Top tier.
yeah, mainly because it is one of the only positions in the mission field that does not require you to be in the same room as your companion 24/7. In fact, I
Oh,
was in an
wow.
office by myself 6.5 to 8 hours a day.
Ah,
Um,
dude.
and
Dang. Did you just not have a companionship then?
there were four elders. There are four elders who were in the office. And so we were a
Oh,
very
okay.
unique situation. It was basically the four elders. It was like, if you ever need to go out in public, any one of the four elders works, right? They're all on, the other three elders are your
Hmm.
companion. If for any
Oh,
public thing, you could be with any
okay.
one of them. But if you're in your office, you're okay to be in your office by yourself. That's fine. Um,
Dang.
and so
Because you're all engaged in the work of the Lord,
exactly, we're
right?
all engaged in the work of the Lord, and that was more than my newly committed personality could handle. I was still new to the
Hmm.
whole 100% dedication to Christ, um,
Hmm.
and having 8 hours to myself in an office in front of a computer for 6 months. It's a lot to ask. uh, as it
Yeah.
is, you know, I went
Oh,
I
man.
went 3 months without issues, but it slowly worked its way in, and before I knew it, I had
It just grinds
yeah,
away.
it ground away at me until I had made a mistake, and so my mission was, I was plagued with, you know, massive amounts of guilt because of what I'd done. Now, I had learned because of my experiences before my mission that honesty was the best policy. So I was absolutely open with my mission president and working with him, and, you know, never hid it for a moment. But it doesn't change the fact that it occurred, and it started to creep back into my life, and I didn't, no matter what I tried, I couldn't turn it around. Which, I mean, that was the first time I had a panic attack. Was there on my mission because
Right.
because I was creeping my way back into serving two masters, which was the cause of all my pain and frustration from before my mission. And no matter what I did, I couldn't figure out how to stop it. And that
Yeah.
was, it was,
That's the
yeah.
zinger right there, is the hopelessness. Like, I've tried everything and nothing seems to be working.
Exactly. And this isn't like I literally had tried everything. I was on my mission. Like I was 100% isolated, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, there you can,
And it worked for a
yeah,
while.
but yeah, so I ended up leaving the office after my 6 months served there. I wasn't kicked out. I just left because 6 months was all that elders were meant to serve in the office. And then I went back out into the mission field for the last 3 months, and I had become quite neurotic at that point. In that,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm surprised your mission president didn't like respond immediately. Like, hey, let's get you moved out of there and focused on something else.
believe it or not, he was probably right in the way he approached it, in that he wasn't approaching it as this is something we need to be fearful of. We need to move you out of here now. He approached it as you're going to go home from your mission and you're going to have computers. So let's see if we can, in this, you know, in this vacuum, let's see if we can work through this with elders here to help you. You have a support system. You have me. You have
Wow.
all these things. Let's see if we can help you work through this. So, you know, in no way do I fault my mission president. I think he did what he thought was best, and I think it was potentially the best course of action, but it was hard for me.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's powerful, actually.
But by the time I went back out in the field, I was so guilt ridden for this thing that, you know, having served in Argentina with everything that happens there, like immorality in Argentina is, in most Latin American countries, is far more widespread than it is even in the United States. And that's saying something. Like the United States, immorality is a pretty common thing. Even there, it's more common. Like seeing pornographic images on the streets was not entirely uncommon. So in the 3 months I had left in my last area, I had memorized the location of every pornographic image on the street so that I could avoid looking at it.
Oh no! Oh,
because I was you know, near neurotic as I was doing my absolute best to avoid it, but I was doing it in the wrong way. I was white knuckling it so hard.
Yeah, and it's like Oh, I don't know who said it, but one of my leaders gave a great analogy of like if you want to avoid something, you don't like it can't be in your
It's Carl
focus.
Jung
Like
or Jung.
Carl
Carl Jung.
Jung.
He's a famous psychologist, and he has a statement. It's something like, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but it is that idea. The harder.
Yeah, it's like something about it's like something about a bike where if you want to avoid some, well, this might have been my leader, but if you're biking and you see a pothole and you look at the pothole and say, "Oh, I better not run into that," you're probably going to run into it because you're looking at the pothole. But if instead you look, okay, this is how I can avoid that pothole, then you go where you're looking.
Right.
That was probably not Carl
Well,
Jung.
but Carl Jung was the first psychologist to make it a popular idea. This idea that the harder you restrain yourself, or the harder you constrict yourself against something,
Right.
the more desirable and the more attractive it becomes to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Dang. Garett, the big brain psychologist, pulling out the big books.
But so because of that, I finished my mission honorably, came home, excited to do things the right way. But as I mentioned, I was white knuckling it, and I was white knuckling it hard. So even days after getting back home, because my parents didn't know. My parents didn't know that I was, struggling again. But days after coming back home, I had messed up again. And that was, once again, that put me into a, panic attack mode, because if you can imagine the guilt, the internal guilt you would feel if between the time you got home and your homecoming talk, you messed up. And you had to get up and report on your mission and report on what you'd learned and give this heartfelt talk, while inside knowing that you had screwed up.
Wow.
That was all sorts of messed up for me. I was not in a good place. But I had a lot of experience with it, so I grin and bear it. That's what I did. But
Jeez.
I immediately opened up to my bishop, let him know what was going on and what I had to do to work on it moving forward. And I've been fighting ever since. I'm 28, so it's been 7 years since then, a little more than 7 years, and I wasn't able to kick it on my own, despite all the major life happenings that you expect to help you with this problem. Started dating, found an eternal spouse, cleaned myself up so I could go to the temple and get married. Was pretty clean after that, and then slowly, just the cycle that I'd already seen before. I slowly started ebbing my way back into it, and then I was stuck back in it, and got pretty bad for a while. In that, I didn't know how to get out. I sought out therapists. I sought out group meetings. Didn't have extremely positive experiences in either one. Mostly because I wasn't.
Glad I'm not the only one.
I'm no dummy when it comes to this stuff. It's not like I'm saying I'm helpless when really I should be saying I'm just naive, right? There are a lot of people who struggle with this who
who say, "Oh, I just don't know what to do," and really what they mean is, I don't know what the tools are.
Yeah.
Right? I have no idea what the tools are.
Yeah.
To get out of this,
Right.
and that wasn't the case for me.
You came into this. Yeah, you came into this. It sounds like you come into this extremely educated.
Right.
Like you're able to quote this psychologist just a minute ago,
Right.
and
Because when I
a lot of
when I came home from my mission, that's what I did. I educated myself because I was like, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not gonna continue to do this, and so I educated myself. And so I would go to therapist after therapist and group meetings and things like that, and I couldn't kick it.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I felt alone. I felt alone because, like, first let's clarify. I never once hid this from my wife. In fact, after
and props to you, man. That solves a lot right there.
After our third date, when we were just dating, I said, "Hey, we've gone on 3 dates. We could potentially be official. I could call you my girlfriend. And vice versa. But before we move forward with this, I need to tell you something, and we can evaluate what we'll do after that. But it is an important part of my life, and it is something that I can't hide." She, in her mind, she's trying to figure out, and I was like, she's trying to figure out the worst case scenario, and I come up and I'm like, well, I am an addict of pornography and masturbation, and she goes, "Wait, what?" I was like, "Yeah, that's like, I struggle with this." And she's like, "That was it? Like, I thought you were gonna say you had a kid or you murdered somebody."
Yeah. I'm actually Ted Bundy.
Yes.
If we can decide how this is going to work later.
But she was very willing to work with me and very willing to be open with me, which is a lot of the reason why I was like, "Hey, this is she may be the right one."
That's amazing. That is amazing. That's the right one.
That's right.
There.
Yeah. So, and so I've always been open with her, but that doesn't mean that my actions aren't traumatizing for her. And
yeah,
it got to the point where the trauma was great enough for her that she just preferred I didn't tell her. Right? She knew I was struggling. She knew she could ask me about it, but unless she asked me about it, she didn't want to know anything, right? Because it prevented her from being harmed.
Yeah.
And because of that, I felt alone. I couldn't talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
And that's
insert baby.
I apologize.
No problems.
I couldn't talk to anyone.
We got the tools
because my wife didn't want to know. And even though I knew other people out there struggle with this, I've always known that. The beginning conversation to find that out is not an easy one to have. It's not easy to be like, "Well, yeah, I'm a pervert." Nice to meet you. Like, it's like, like there's just an awkward pause after that, and you're like, and that's
who would admit
right.
I mean, the likelihood of them also being perverts is pretty high, but they would never.
I mean,
come out, you know.
It's not something
It's-
we should hide, but it's also not something that's easy not to hide.
Yeah.
Like we should be more open about it. We should be willing to say, yeah, I struggle
Right.
with this, and this is something I have to deal with. And that's what allows us to help each other. That's what allows us to really grow. But that's harder to do than it is to say. And that was the problem I was running into.
Yeah.
And
I I think there's definitely, you know, you need to find the right context because, you know, just like your wife, there are some people that are like just can't hear that, like they can't handle that
Right.
right now. And so it's hard to find those people who are ready to handle that.
Exactly. And so my experiences with therapists and with group meetings was really just a lot of experiences letting me know that it wasn't the right situation. Most of my therapists would give me tools that I could use, but that didn't address, as much as this is a physical problem.
Yeah.
It is even more a spiritual problem, right? The lack of spiritual connection I had with God fed into the problem.
Yeah.
And so I would be given physical tools to try and help me, right? To try and help resist temptations, right? But in essence, I was just teaching myself to white knuckle more, which isn't effective. And
going alone more.
like that's not effective,
Yeah.
and it didn't push me forward. And a therapist's job is not really to increase my spirituality. And
Yeah. Well,
what?
A lot of therapists, like intervention therapy is just the theory of, you know, if they just know, if they just have a paradigm shift, then
Right.
Their life will start getting better. But that's not the same with addiction. It's not, you can know all the tools you need, but without the practice and without the constant discipline every day, it's not going to do anything.
And so feeling alone like that, I did reach out to group therapy meetings, right? I went to a group. The issue is that the groups that I was exposed to were like, okay, here we're gonna have a group meeting about sexual addiction, right? And you go to that and you're like, okay, I'm gonna create some connection. I'm gonna grow, right? Problem is an addiction to pornography and masturbation, when it comes to the myriad of sexual addictions that are out there, is minor. Like, just to put it bluntly, it's minor. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Like there. So you
Oh,
go to
gosh.
a group meeting for sexual addiction, and you get people, you know, chatting about, you know, the adultery that they just committed.
Yeah.
And kind of in the opposite direction, you end up thinking to yourself, well, hey, you know, that other guy just committed adultery.
I'm
Like,
pretty
I'm
good.
okay. Like,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah.
you know,
that makes you feel good, at least.
it's, you know, it serves as this justification. But,
Oh boy.
But the problem is a justification doesn't help. Like, it doesn't help you get out of it, right? And so I kept my group meetings would just serve as rationalization for further, you know, there's no need to fix myself because I'm way better than these other guys are, which terrible. Don't compare yourself to others, but
And
it's a hard thing to do.
so
you know?
interesting.
So
yeah, and I'd never had that experience, so I had no idea what other groups were like. So I'm really glad I didn't.
Yeah, so that was the thing, and I was so lonely. I was so lost the only thing I could really think of, the only thing I could think of that could possibly help me was like, I need connection with somebody. And so 4 years ago now, I went to my bishop, who knew I was struggling, knew I was going through what I was going through, and basically told him, I said, look, I know I'm not alone in this, but I feel alone. And I feel alone because I can't talk to anybody. You know, modern day media likes to portray addiction recovery as though you just, you go find a sponsor, and then that sponsor's just this perfect companion who calls you every day and works things out. Do you know how hard it is to find a sponsor? Period. Do you know how hard it is to find somebody who's willing to be a companion and hold you accountable, even when you're not accountable yourself? You are.
That's super hard.
Like to ask somebody, say, hey, I need you to check in with me every day. Even if I don't check in with you, like even if I don't respond, I need you to check in with me every day. That is a lot to ask somebody. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find somebody to do that for me. And I know that sounds bad, but most of the people in my life had 4+ children and lives of their own. Like that's not an easy thing to ask of somebody. And so I
didn't even think about that situation.
Yeah.
Like all of your friends are in the family world, and that's a lot.
Exactly. I'm asking a ton of somebody with no return on investment. Your return is that you may or may not help me, right? Because having a sponsor isn't a guarantee of addiction recovery. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, about 4 years ago, I started approaching my bishops and saying, look, I feel alone in this, despite the fact that I know I'm not alone. And I don't ever want anybody else to feel this way. So if anyone needs it, if anybody needs somebody to talk to, somebody to open up with, my name is available. Anonymity's out the window.
Right.
You have them call me, and I will talk to them. And that was
wow.
I started doing that. Unfortunately, that's not a request that bishops, or that's not a offer bishops get all that often. And so I never got taken up on it. For 3.5 years, I never got taken up on it. Never had a bishop reach out to me to let me know about someone. Never talked to anybody about it. But 7-8 months ago, the bishop of the ward I'm currently in approached me and said, I know you talked to me about this. I know you offered. There are several men in our ward who are in the same situation you are. And I was thinking it might be helpful to start a group of men within the ward all dealing with the exact same problem so that they can support each other. Would you be willing to spearhead that? I said, yeah, absolutely. Of course. And
let's go. That's so awesome. That is so cool that just formed.
Yeah. So,
wow.
We met one Sunday. There were 4 of us, and we chatted, we discussed it. And one of the guys in the group was actually a previous graduate of the Men of Moroni program. And, he got out of the program. He, as is the way of things, men are quick to forget God, and slowly allowed himself to fall back into it. But he spoke positively about it, and in that group setting, we talked on it. We discussed it. We talked about it, and the bishop who was present said, "Hey, this Men of Moroni program, it still exists. It's still there. And if any of you need it, you let me know. We'll work something out. We will get you the help you need. And
Dang. Intro life-changing services.
That's right. That's where I was introduced to the Men of Moroni program. That's where I did eventually decide to start up the program. So I started back in January, not long ago, right? 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we should probably clarify for any new listeners, like, so there's life-changing services. That's the big company that helps people out. And I went through the Sons of Helaman program for the young upcoming, like, pre-mission boys. Right. And now you're talking about the men's group, like after mission typically, or having a family, right? Is that
it is. Technically speaking, at any time after 18, you could switch to the Men of Moroni program. But from what I understand, if you have not gone on your mission yet, you are happy. Okay. They are happy to have you in the Sons of Helaman program. So,
yeah.
So
that's true. I can validate that.
So that was my first introduction to life-changing services, with its multiple programs, including, like you said, Sons of Helaman, Men of Moroni, Women of Worth, which is the support group for traumatized women, Eternal Warriors, which is just for anybody who's dealing with any sort of self-mastery problem.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, but so being introduced to that and starting this group provided me with something that in the past was lacking, because this group is not all about, all right, here are your tools, this is how you go about it, and let's just stick to those tools. No, this group is about maintaining a spiritual life and a spiritual armor. All right, the armor of righteousness, the armor of God. And by maintaining that, then you can start changing your addiction. And that was a group setting that I hadn't experienced in any way other than on my mission. And so in a sense, that was returning to the greatest period of success I'd ever had in my life concerning this.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm still in the thick of things. Eli's our resident expert. I'm our resident novice. I'm still fighting.
Yeah. So that's where you're at today. And that's amazing. Like, already I can tell you're just this amazing, like, intellectual and determined person who can do a lot of good just where you're out.
Right.
And I just think of how powerful you become the more you progress through your journey. Right. I actually had a question earlier. Before we get into why you're fighting now. I'm kind of like blown away by how, like, this system you created for dealing with the pornography addiction before your mission. If you can go back to that moment again, what do you think was the why you fight then? Like, what was, like, you kept putting these pictures into this room, and you kept pressing the button to destroy it, and it was only that constant effort that made progress. How did you not, like, lose hope after the first couple of times you blew up that room?
Yeah. It's a great question. And the answer is My father. My father grew up in a not active family. They weren't active. His dad was an alcoholic, and he went to seminary in high school because he grew up in a town that was like his high school class was 19 people, and of those 19 people, 17 of them went to seminary, and so so did he. Like he went to seminary because everybody else went to release time seminary, and he's like, okay, whatever. um, he didn't really go to church. He wasn't active in that sense. And when he graduated high school, he didn't know what to do, what he was going to do with his life. And he said he was asking himself one day, what am I going to do? And the Spirit of God put it in his heart. You should serve a mission, which was, out of character for my dad. He's like, why would I serve a mission? He'd never read the Book of Mormon at that point.
Yeah.
Like he'd never even never spent time with it, but it was a prompting he received, and he's like, okay. And so he went to his bishop, put in his papers, did all those things. So in the course of one generation, right, from my grandparents to my father not only went on his mission, but he reactivated his family because of that. Because of his mission, he reactivated his family. Then he got married in the temple. He had 9 kids, and every one of his 6 sons went on a mission. And I was the 5th son. So by that point, it was a family thing. Like the mission had more significance than, this is something you got to do because it's our church. No, to me, to my family, the mission was, it was something that had changed our lives for the better. It had changed my father's life, and it had changed our lives. And so the mission meant a lot to me before I ever went on it. That was the reason I fought.
So it was kind of like at that point. Yeah. So it's kind of like at that point, like giving up is not an option anymore. Like you just have to. Yeah,
I had to do this because it was honoring the sacrifice my father made, and the sacrifice my brothers had made, and the change that it had created in our lives. I was trying to honor that because, despite my struggles, I wasn't a bad kid. It's not, I was quite nearly a goody two shoes. I was a Peter Priested if there ever was one, at least on the outside. And
yeah,
so I wanted to live up to that. I wanted to honor their sacrifice. And so I did.
Yeah. That's powerful. But so, and now you're here, you have a family, and you're in this group. Oof.
One second.
Okay.
All right, I'm back. So now I'm here.
Nice. Magic of editing. So, yeah, now you're here. Now you have your family. You've you've experienced group setting, you've reached out and decided you needed something more. So why do you fight? What is the reason to keep going on despite all this?
I mean, let me count the ways. There are the obvious answers. Like, I fight for the relationship with my wife. I fight for my children, that my children never have to go through this same thing alone. Because I'm not naive enough to assume that my children won't struggle with this, right? The world we live in, I know that my children will be exposed. I know that they will have this fight. So I fight to be an example for them. I fight because I know it's right. I fight because I miss my Savior. I miss his influence. I miss the spiritual juggernaut I was on my mission. The spiritual confidence that came from that. But I think more personal to me, my whole life I've been told of the leadership and the benefit I can and will be to others, to their faith, and to their worship. I know without a doubt that there are people out there that I can help. And I fight because the only way I'll achieve that assistance, the only way I can provide for those people I don't know, provide them with the assistance they need, with the help that they need, is if I turn my life around and be the person that they need.
Yeah. It's powerful. Yeah. There's no words. Oh, man. And yeah, I want to, you are an inspiration to me, Garett. Just the amount of resilience you have to have is really inspiring. And yeah, don't ever doubt that you're going to be that guy that's going to lead us all to victory.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do.
You're, yeah, in my mind, you're already there. Like, just the mental state you're in right now of having that hope is so close to victory already. Right. It is its own kind of victory.
Right.
Well, there you have it.
I guess that's us in a very, very, very large nutshell.
Yeah. Very large indeed. Very,
yeah.
Very, very big and traumatizing, and yeah, that's me.
There you go. I mean, I am so happy to be a part of this podcast, to have this opportunity to reach out to other people, because this is the help. This is the the outstretched hand of hope that I didn't have for a long time. And if I can provide that to just one person, I mean, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think it's crazy that we met in that meeting and started just rolling with it, and everything seemed to line up. Right. I think this will be a good thing. Yeah. Should we? I think we should have some invitations for our listeners.
Well, yeah. Do we have an email that we want to set up? If they have questions, comments, concerns, maybe they want to reach out about something, that we can provide that for them.
Right. We have the original email.
There you go.
Actually. So you can, well, first of all, if you're struggling with any sort of self-mastery, whether it's pornography, masturbation, whether it's, another type of addiction, substance, behavioral, any kind, come check out lifechangingservices.org and see the many programs they have there. They have an online assessment that kind of guides you to the best resource you have. And yeah, if you want to connect with us, we're here for you. Just email podcast@lifechangingservices.org. And we'll get that up and running again.
Absolutely.
So if you have any stories,
if you'd like to be a guest,
if you
share
have
your
any,
story.
Definitely share stories. We want to hear from you, and suggestions to make it better, suggestions for content, just any questions.
Yep.
Well,
I'd
say sorry, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say that to anybody out there who is struggling, you're not alone. There are thousands and thousands of men and women fighting in the same battle you are. So reach out. We can help each other.
Yeah, I'm excited. We have an interesting dynamic with like a plethora of different experiences, from Eli to Garett. Exactly. Different stages in life. I'm still looking for that eternal companion. Yeah. So,
well,
I'd say, shall we close it off with?
I was gonna say we can close it off with an encouragement. Keep fighting. And to quote my favorite fictitious president, we will not go quietly into the night. We won't go down without a fight.
My man. Yeah.
So let's
go.
Let's keep the motivation high and keep the spirit going. We've got this.
Sweet. Whew. Let's do it.
If you're listening to this podcast, you have probably found that you are in need of, you are strongly desiring, a level of self-mastery that you have not been able to achieve on your own. Or you are a loved one or a parent who knows someone who would like to achieve that level of self-mastery. It's not fun to be in that situation. Been there, done that. I've become a specialist in this area by spending 30 years initially searching for and harvesting eternal principles found in the world of psychology, science, and the words of the prophets, many of them found in the Book of Mormon, for my own sake first, and then I found that they're of great value to others. Instead of just hoarding these concepts, we put them into a book form that is easy for you to access. Like Dragons Did They Fight? You'll understand the reason why it's called that when you start reading it. But go to likedragonsfree.com, get your own free copy of it, download it, and then when you're ready to talk over your circumstances and make a battle plan, call 877-HERO-877, in other words 877-4376. Talk to our headquarters people, and if necessary, they'll arrange for you to have a consultation with me. I am sad that you're going through this, but I've watched thousands and thousands of young warriors gain the confidence and strength they need to be able to have the lives they want now and the futures they desire to have. We will see you soon.